Just kidding. I just want to make you uncomfortable.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Craig Herndon. It's my honor to serve as the facilitator of this session today. And when I'm facilitating this session, I serve as the Vice Chancellor of Workforce Development for the Community College System. Thanks very much for joining us. Exactly 50 years and 7 days ago, a forward-thinking governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia signed into law the existence of the Virginia Community College System. And the creation of our system was a brilliant idea for many reasons. Among those reasons, though, and among the good ideas contained now in the Code of Virginia, was the creation of a single state board for community colleges. As opposed to local or elected boards, we have a single board at the state level. And that single board at the state level, the State Board for Community Colleges, our governing board, has a great deal of responsibility. And we're thrilled that governors have held a tradition in Virginia of appointing bright people who aren't community college experts. And that's intentional. The folks who comprise our board, and three of them are with us today, are experts in their own fields. Frequently, they're titans of business, and they're influential people in the public and private sector. I'm thrilled to be able to have three of the best with us today. And if there are folks watching at home who are members of the state board, you're also the best. We've got Robin Sullenberger with us today, immediately to my left and next to me. He's the retired CEO of the Shenandoah Valley Partnership, a regional economic development and marketing organization. He's a resident of Highland County, Virginia, and served 5 terms on the Board of Supervisors before retiring from that role in 2011. He was featured, many folks know who know Robin, not too long ago in Virginia Business Magazine among the 50 most influential people in Virginia. They don't rank them, Robin, but you're higher than 50 in my mind. He's also a graduate of Virginia Tech, where he majored in marketing. He spent 10 years with Dominion Resources in various management positions, and he also served in roles of director of real estate in that organization. He currently serves as a business advisor and consultant for private firms in the Shenandoah Valley, is active in several boards, including our State Board of Community Colleges, the Shenandoah Valley Partnership, and the Shenandoah Workforce Board. Next to Robin is Bill Hall. Bill's an award-winning 30-year communications, public affairs, financial, and philanthropic executive, and director of Fortune 200, company. And while he was with Dominion Resources, that Fortune 200 company, Bill had communications, public affairs, treasury responsibilities, and others that include the development and implementation of strategic planning for communications. He was the chief company spokesperson. He was the advertising and branding leader. He led crisis communication. And he was executive speechwriter and communicator for the organization. With all those responsibilities, it's probably hard to believe, with 26 years at Dominion, no, 30 years at Dominion, Bill also had a life before Dominion. Bill was also, prior to joining Dominion, he was the managing editor for 6 years of the Danville Register. And for folks in that community, they know it's a daily.
Paul and I crossed paths on numerous occasions back in the 80s, and it probably won't, after you hear us, it won't surprise you to realize that we were both mouthpieces for the same organization. So, and Bill accused me of trying to run him over the side of a mountain up in Bath County at the pump storage station the first time I ever met him, and I don't think he's ever forgiven me for that. So
I'm sued.
We have a little bantering session every time we see each other about that. I think what I would say about my career is more that my career found me as opposed to me finding it. I started my career as I was recruited actually as a basketball coach in Bath County. I'm from Highland County, which is a neighboring county, but I had played basketball against the Bath County people, and they knew me fairly well. And when I got out of Tech, they recruited me to be the business vocational teacher, but the real job was to be the basketball coach. Make a long story short, when the pump storage station was being built in Bath County, and most of you probably wouldn't know anything about this, but this is the largest pump storage station in the world. We had 3,000 people working there at one time, and during the entire 10-year course of the project, over 10,000 people. So you can imagine that during the course of that, there was a lot of training that went on. We hired mostly local people. I was recruited out of the local high school system at triple my salary, I might add, which was one of the reasons that I did that. To become the training director there, and then I ended up with Virginia Power, Dominion at that time, and I eventually moved to Richmond. When I moved to Richmond, I found out quickly that the corporate ladder is accessible but it also is the expectations for the amount of time and energy that you put into that are off the charts. So I had always had this dream of being a cowboy because I live on a big cattle farm in Highland County. My wife is a cattle broker, and so I decided to go home and be a cowboy, so I actually wrote my own ticket out of Dominion and left and went home to be a cowboy, and very shortly found out that horses and cattle are not very stimulating on a day-to-day basis when you are a talker. I ended up running for the Board of Supervisors, got elected, then ended up helping start the Shenandoah Regional Partnership, which is based in Harrisonburg at JMU, and ultimately ended up being there for 15 years, and my office was at JMU. I went to Tech, my son went to UVA, my office was at JMU, so I love education completely. I have since retired recently in the last couple of years from that, although what I have found out in that is that if you do your job correctly in the corporate world and the business world, you make a lot of friends who expect favors in return when you retire. And that is exactly where I am. So I spend a lot of time consulting and doing other things that I'm more than happy to do, although living an hour and a half from civilization is a little bit trying on occasions when you have to drive everywhere to see anyone. So it's been a great ride, though, and I've certainly enjoyed every moment of it and don't regret a thing.
Thank you. Well, first off, Craig, thank you for calling me esteemed. I've never been called that before in my life. But at the University of Richmond, I majored in finance and religion, which is an interesting combination. And no, it's not because I worship money or anything like that either. My father was a minister, but I did want to learn about finance. But I was also editor-in-chief of the college newspaper at the University of Richmond, and really felt that was what I wanted to do, meaning communications. And what I did was basically after I graduated, and most of you probably weren't even born then, I graduated in '75. It was right after Watergate, so reporting jobs were difficult to find, but I was fortunate enough to be hired by the Danville Register as a City Hall reporter, and then I went from there. There were a couple of retirements and deaths, and was the editor after just a few years, and great experience. Unfortunately, newspapers today, have your hometown newspaper delivered at home, by the way. I want to put in a brief commercial, because our communities, especially local news, we're going to suffer if we do not have those newspapers available. And I was recruited by Dominion in 1983 to be the chief company spokesman, and from there I basically, news releases and crisis communications, as Craig said, but also did a stint in Treasury as the main finance person for debt instruments, and then I was head of investor relations with Wall Street for a number of years, then moved back to become vice president of external affairs and corporate communications, and that's where my heart is. That's what I love doing. It entails a lot. It's interesting. It's one of those things. People would come to me and they would always say, well, would you consider hiring me? I can do PR. Well, I always required a spelling test of any prospective employees. And you'd be surprised at the MBAs who cannot write their name in the sand with a stick. I mean, it was awful. And I say that, just to reemphasize how important communications is. And retired from Dominion 2 years ago after 30 years, and like Robin now, doing some consulting. And I'm not cheap, but if you want to hire me, that's I'm available. But that's in a nutshell.
Well, my past is not as exciting as you two gentlemen. I grew up on a tobacco farm.
You're an engineer, that's the problem.
That's true. Engineers are boring. It's true, we're boring. No, I grew up on a tobacco farm in a little place called Callens, Virginia. It's about 20 miles north of Danville, between Martinsville and Chatham, if you know where those two places are. In the off-season, my dad helped build houses. So as a young boy, I liked building things. To this day, I live on part of the family farm, and I still like to build things. So, and in high school I had a love for math. So the combination of mathematics, liking to build things, be an engineer. So I went to Denver Community College. From there, transferred to Virginia Tech. And what really sparked me was I had an interned 2 summers with the company I've worked for the past 32 years, and just fell in love with it. And it's problem solving. If you have children who like to solve problems, suggest they be an engineer, because that's what we do. We don't necessarily build things, we solve problems. And then really to get into leadership in the company, I've had the same boss for 32 years. I've kind of followed him as he's moved along in the company. And I remember at a very young age, probably way too early in life, too young, didn't have enough experience, but I made it. He put me in charge of a design team. And I fell in love with more so engaging in leading the team than I did solving the problem myself. So that was really what sparked it for me was, and I hate the term manage. You don't manage people. You manage projects. You manage things. You don't manage people. You lead people. And I really fell in love with leading a team, particularly a team that had a lot of different, in engineering you might have mechanical engineers on a team, electrical, civils, and they're all worried about different parts of the project. And really pulling that team together to solve a problem from all these different points of view. And the other thing I'll tell you about engineers is they're terrible communicators. They're boring and they're terrible communicators. So really helping that team communicate and solve a problem and build something that works at the end of the day. That's what really turned it on for me.
Thank you. And you can tell already, despite the difference in discipline, there's a commonality among these folks. They're doing things, and they are and have been doing things they love, and they've been doing them for a long time. And Robin, you, in your experience, I think folks who know you would say you have talents and strengths. Which ones did you rely upon regularly as an executive leader?
Thank you for recognizing that.
Your wife disagrees, but I
Okay,
think you have.
absolutely. I think the thing probably that helped me more than anything throughout my career was that I have a penchant for being very candid with people about the situations that we're dealing with. And I think one of the great faults of the business world or any situation for strong leaders is whether or not they have the capacity to look people straight in the eye and tell them they either are or are not doing a good job. And if they are not doing a good job, what they need to do to improve their performance and so forth. One of the things, and I can go back to our days with Dominion in saying that you look at a process that has an evaluation criteria list of examples, and basically what you're asked to do is say this person is not performing, they're performing at an acceptable level. And by the way, nobody thinks they're performing only at an acceptable level. Everybody thinks they're in one of those 2 or 3 categories above that. So they're either exemplary or they're whatever. But the ability to actually sit down with people and explain to them what they are or are not bringing to their job is an absolutely critical portion of the leadership process. And I would say that being open-minded is probably the other thing. I'm an extreme liberal by nature, but I had to become a lot more conservative in the business world because I think you have to look at all parts of what's going on within that business and try to help make decisions that affect the bottom line. And by the way, one of the interesting things that's happening in today's world is that management by committee has become a bit of a new wave kind of way of doing business. I'm certainly not going to sit here and say that I don't think management by committee doesn't have its assets and good points, but ultimately somebody has to be capable of making the decision. And if you are going to be a strong leader, you have to get input from everybody and be open-minded about other people's opinions, but ultimately you've got to have the strength to make the decision yourself, stick by it, and suffer the consequences in some cases if that's the way it turns out.
Thanks, Robin. So, Bill, I hear Robin saying being candid, sometimes moderating when it's appropriate to do so, but also being decisive. I wonder if you can think of things from your experience through Dominion Resources at the Danville Register that you saw that derailed potential leaders or existing leaders. What are traits that folks demonstrated that took them off course?
Okay, I think one of the big ones is not delegating. That is so crucial. If you hire employees to do jobs, and if you try to do everything yourself, number one, it's not healthy for you. Number two, they're not going to stick around because they're not fulfilling their potential. And I wrote down a couple of others not setting goals. Everybody, every team, every corporation, company, the Virginia Foundation for Community Colleges, the Virginia Community College System, everybody needs a set of goals. And I'm not talking about soft goals. I'm talking about goals that are just a little bit, maybe, they may seem out of reach to some, but you need to challenge yourself like that. The other one I would say is resisting change, really, because people who resist change are going to miss the boat on so much stuff that's going on, and they're just not going to be able to advance. They're not going to be able to become leaders if they resist change. And then failing to learn. My goodness. A leader has to admit when he or she is wrong and has to learn from mistakes. Don't try to cover them up. Don't try to hide them. If we're all human, we make mistakes. I think I do sometimes. And one other one that might surprise you is poor communication. I know I'm going to harp on communication, but you need to talk to your employees. You need to talk to your supervisors. You need to talk to everyone about where we are, where we're going, and what's going on, and provide the feedback as to how that individual what else that individual can do, what his or her career path may be, that type of thing. Then praise and reward your employees. Praise and reward. I've seen too many people who've gotten fired, quite frankly, at Dominion, who did nothing but criticize their employees. Well, you know what a downer that is. I mean, that's just not going to do it. And then the last thing I'd tell you is make work fun. Now, that may not sound like a big deal, but get people excited. Make them want to come to work. Don't make them want to phone in sick or go after you with a machete. Make sure that you are setting a standard in the organization was, yes, we have a lot to do, and yes, we will get it done, but we will do it in a way that is enjoyable and rewarding.
Thank you, Bill.
Let me make one comment just to something Bill said, because this is incredibly profound. You heard the speaker at lunch today make the comment, in spite of the fact that it came from Alcoholics Anonymous, I think, but if nothing changes, nothing changes. Nothing could be more profound than that statement in regard to anything that's happening within the education system, in the business world, or wherever you happen to be.
Well, Darren's overseen a lot of change recently in the acquisitions of some new businesses that are part of your portfolio. So, Darren, you've been part of our organization now for a few years, and you've come to understand our culture. If you could teach us one thing about leadership that drives growth, that helps drive change, what would you tell us? What would you tell the folks in the audience?
Thank you, Craig. A couple things. Two words I use a lot with in business and people. I mean, the business I'm in, we're in a people business. Community college system, we're in a people business. Without the people, you don't have anything. Clarity. Whether it's clarity in communication, clarity of vision. People don't know what you expect of them if you don't make it clear. And I ascribe to what Robin said. I like to be very direct, kind, but very direct with people, and be clear about where we're going, how we need to get there. The other thing is simplification. Anybody can complicate something. Anybody can. And unfortunately, engineers like to complicate things. I like to simplify. I'm not smart enough to understand complicated. And in fact, if somebody gives me a complicated answer, I tend to not trust it as much. So be a simplifier. Be a simplifier in life. People like simple. You can grab hold to simple. So clarity and simplification. And I'd say what that allows you to do then is to empower people. And the Chancellor sitting in the back of the room, I've not met many people any better at clarity and simplification, okay, in an organization, and then empowering people to go do big things. Because again, you can't, I've got a young gentleman I was telling somebody a story about earlier that runs our Charlotte office, and he is a go-getter. He's 20 years younger than me, but he's going to do great things in his career, and he always talks about wanting to control things. I'm like, Skip, control is an illusion. Okay? On a good day, you have influence. So practice influencing people and then empower them with a clarity of vision, simplicity, and empower them to go do big things.
So clarity and simplification are good guidance for aspiring leaders and existing leaders. Robin, you know our community college system as well, and you've actually been exposed to us for a number of years, both through your work in economic development, the Virginia Board of Workforce Development, its predecessor. What untapped opportunities exist within our organization? What are we missing as an organization? What are the folks in this room missing when it comes to expanding our ability to have the influence, have the impact we want to have as a mission? What would you guide us to do differently?
Well, one of the, I think, and I'll attribute this to the Chancellor as well, as Darren just mentioned, one of the things that the Chancellor has said quite frequently since I've been on the board is that community colleges were once looked upon as high schools with ashtrays. And that certainly is probably a fairly accurate description of where we were a number of years ago. What has happened, obviously, is that the community college system has evolved. It has become more relevant and in fact, not only relevant, but absolutely critical to the future of this country, to the future of Virginia, to the future of everything. Because we know, without any question whatsoever, that we are, in most cases, the primary course of action to the business world and training and making everybody be all that they can be, as one of the other gentlemen said earlier. I think one of the more interesting experiences I had in recent years was serving on the Higher Ed Commission, and that was sort of the predecessor for doing the top jobs legislation, which was the predecessor for what we've done this year with legislative measures and so forth. And Lynn Rose, who was the former president of James Madison University, was kind of the I guess for all practical purposes, the educational guru of that whole process. And community or college presidents and others were on there, but he sort of led the charge. I had sat down with him 15 years ago when I first moved to JMU and said, Dr. Rose, I want to talk to you about training. And he said, we don't do training. We're educators. And I said, oh, well, excuse me, we'll revisit that at some point in time. When he stood up in front of the legislative folks and everybody in Richmond at the end of that Higher Ed Commission work, and we were about to propose legislation, he stood up and said, folks, there is absolutely no difference between somebody who's in a K through 12 program and someone who's in a PhD program. We are all training the workforce of the future. Make no mistake about that. What I would say to you in regard to the community college system in particular is you are at the forefront. Do what these guys said earlier, but have fun. I mean, it's much easier to have fun when you retire because you can do and say anything you want. There's no consequences. But nevertheless, go to work every day and look happy about it and understand that you are literally, you hear this all the time, but it could not be more true. You are changing lives every day that you go to work. And every single person that steps in front of you can be somebody that you can have a huge impact on. So that's my bar stool for the day. But
well, you reflected in those comments in the future. I'd be interested. Two of you are recently retired, and Darren, you're years from it, but you've got experience.
Not as many years as you think.
But you've got experiences that clearly have illustrated that you've had an eye towards the future to make the progress that you've had. What would you suggest individuals in this room do to think about not their personal future, but to position the organization well and the jobs they're in and the person who follows them? What would you suggest for them to position well for the future? Anyone in this room, and Darren, or recent retirees.
as individuals or
As individuals, but to benefit the organization.
Yeah, okay. Well, a couple of simple things. My wife and I have 3 daughters. All have graduated college, off the payroll, so to speak. And we have 2 are married, and I actually have a little granddaughter, 11 months old. And, you know, I'd say one thing we always told them was always put more in than you take out. I don't care what you're doing. Always put more in than you take out. Don't expect anything you don't work hard for. That might sound really simple, but I think sometimes it's easy to forget that. And I'd say the way you need to remember it is the people around you. Everybody in this room, you probably are where you are, and you owe somebody. John Downey was saying earlier, he owed people for investing in them. I've had people invest in me, my dad. My dad's been dead 13 years now, and there's not a day goes by I don't use a saying he used to say to me. And when he said it, I'm like, you don't know anything. But that's how I live my life today. He was a simplifier. Never graduated high school, but he was a great simplifier. And then the gentleman I mentioned a while ago that gave me opportunities, been my boss for 32 years, I'd say grab hold of somebody close to you, and they don't need to even know you're doing it necessarily. But mentor them and always be preparing them. If you're going to do anything else in life, something you think's bigger or better, more challenging, always be mentoring somebody around you to be able to step in and fill in where you are. And don't ever think you can't be replaced. All of us I remind myself all the time. My wife reminds me how I replace it. So be preparing those people around you too, and they will surprise you. I'd say be quick to give them more opportunity than they think, or more responsibility than they think they can take on. Again, I see the Chancellor. You got a great leader of this organization, and he's always looking around for people he can delegate more things to. And it's not just because he doesn't want to do them, but he wants to give people those opportunities. So give people those opportunities. They'll surprise you in a good way.
One of the things I think, Craig, that we're, and I'm not going to get off on some soapbox about soft skills and employability skills and everything, because that happens to all of you everywhere nowadays. But one of the real issues in today's world is a lack of communication skills, and I think Bill probably is the person maybe to expound on that a little bit, because we are seeing a complete lessening and a less emphasis and less real success in the ability to actually communicate. And I can tell you personally, I don't know how to do much of anything, and that is an open admission on my part, but I know how to communicate with other people and get them to do it for me and make me look good and take credit for it in some cases. And I'm being somewhat facetious in saying that, but it is hugely important.
Absolutely.
You're supposed to respond to that.
I said absolutely.
I think we got a tough question, and I'm not looking at you, Bill, but I think anybody can answer this question, but I've got a tough one. So I mentioned in the beginning, we're celebrating 50 years. We're 50 years and 7 days old right now.
Right.
And if we had the chance, and I don't think we do, but if we had the chance to wipe the slate clean and recreate the community college system in Virginia and build it from the ground up, what would you suggest we do as an organization differently? You know us from your role in the State Board for Community Colleges. You know us as consumers of our product, our students. And you know us, as Darren does, as actually a student himself at Danville Community College. What would you suggest for us, and for the next 50 years, perhaps?
Well, I would have hired Glenn Dubois right off the bat. I don't know how old he was in this. Well, I do. We're the same age, but I wouldn't go there. But no, I think the important thing for the community college system is, and I'm not blowing smoke, I'm impressed every day with the programs we've got, whether it's, the Rural Horseshoe or Great Expectations or some of these other wonderful programs that bring disadvantaged youth into it. And I wish we could have gotten started earlier on that. Maybe the times when Mills Godwin was governor in his first time in the term in the 1960s were not conducive to that. But at the same time, we need to be looking and thinking ahead to make sure that, we've got these programs in place. And another thing I would point out is we need personal development. Now, that may sound like a catchphrase, but personal development in and of itself is not a means to a bigger goal. There are these Trappist monks in Tibet and elsewhere who have been successful businessmen for 1,000 years, successful businessmen. And the way they did it is through hard work, through listening, and I just think that what we need to do from the community college standpoint is to make sure that students listen to other students, students listen to professors, of course, but professors listen to students and talk to, don't set yourself up in these proverbial silos that I see in corporate America. Make sure you get out and learn other things. We're not going to learn anything, ladies and gentlemen, by sitting here staring at each other and looking. We need to talk to each other about what we can do to improve. So therefore, I would just say, don't be afraid to offer up ideas about what you see. Well, why doesn't the community college system consider this or that? It may not be feasible. It might be a great idea, but nobody's going to chase you or anything like that if you just suggest something. And I think that's probably the one thing I would do is say, don't be afraid to offer up ideas.
Friends in the audience, you've heard a challenge from Bill Hall. You've heard that there are 40 hours left, 42 hours left in this conference. I think this is the place to have those kinds of conversations. I'm sorry, Bill, to interrupt, but we've got a venue to do just that, to have the de-siloing you're suggesting.
Well, yes, and I encountered it at Dominion Resources all the time, and we were constantly saying, well, we're going to, let's tear down these silos. Easier said than done, because people want their own little fiefdoms. And that is dangerous, because when you establish your own little empire, so to speak, within an organization, you don't want anybody to maybe even know what's going on or talk to your employees. I've seen it a lot. And the people who resist that, who form these silos, do not succeed. They do not succeed. And I'd love to see us work on, I know we are, but personal development skills.
Thank you. Others want to weigh in on this idea of the next 50 years? Or
Yeah, the other thing I'd say is about the next 50 years, and some of those things are going on right now. It's been fascinating being on the board going into the third year. Some of the change that's taking place is not being afraid to change. And I think the community college system has been pretty adaptable.
Yes.
And I'll use an example right now is shared services. I mean, to be thinking about we've moved along with that as quickly as we have. It's at more the speed that business would do something. And really the focus of it is to allow the resources, the colleges, to focus on the mission. And what's a mission? Anybody? What's a mission in the community college system? Training, educating, not pushing paper around and doing a bunch of other things. I mean, so what I'd say the next 50 years is be adaptable, be willing to the community around you needs you to be different. Don't be afraid to adapt to serve the community better. And stick. Don't forget what your mission is. Organizations that fail, they forget what their mission is, and they're not adaptable. They're not willing to change. So that's what I'd say about the next 50 years.
Thank you.
Well, the word communication has come up over and over here, and I think one of the things, if you look historically at this, what you have seen in the past in many cases has been, and it's a two-way street, the business world has not communicated well with the education system as to what their needs are, but the education system has been somewhat haughty about just deciding what the business world needs and teaching whatever they view as being the right things to do, and then hoping that is somewhere close to what the business world is looking for.
The ultimate silos.
Absolutely, that is the ultimate silos, and it is incumbent upon you as an educator to understand what impact you are having and how you are directly impacting, in fact, the bottom line of these corporations, because for all practical purposes, particularly in today's world, they can't survive without you. The business world that is not embracing technology and further education, whether it be no matter what it is, beyond high school or whatever, is not going to succeed without the education world being a partner. And it's incumbent upon you to communicate with these folks and find out what it is, and you have people who are designated for that. There's nothing wrong with every one of you having that as part of your day-to-day. Reach out to people who are your friends who are in the business world and get ideas from them. It really doesn't matter how you do it, just do it.
Esteemed panelists, let's take a question from the audience. Members of the audience, I'd love to hear a question from you to pose to one or all of these members. I see one here in the front row.
If you were going to hire a recent community college graduate, what do you look for?
Or is that addressed to me? I don't have my glasses on right now, so I can't tell. If I were to hire, and I have a number over the years, what I look for is someone who, frankly, is driven, who is articulate. Again, the communications thing, y'all are going to hear that ad nauseum. Articulate, and actually shows that he or she has a willingness to learn what your department's like, what your company's like, what the industry's like, and what it's all about, and absorb that and apply that. And I also don't want to hire people who are in too big of a hurry. I do like to hire people who are smarter than me, and I mean that seriously. I think that's, some people are threatened by that. Some managers and officers and gosh knows who else are threatened by that. But bring in very smart people, not only because of what they can do, but what you can learn from them. And also, you talk about a succession planning situation, you need to know who has got these skills. So I think I know that's a broad brush for several things. But they've also got, I was talking about communication again. I think I've always asked an employee I would hire, I would say, would you be willing to get up in front of an organization and make a speech? And a lot of them will go, no, I don't know anything about that. And I said, well, we can train. We'll give you speech training. It's not a big deal. And if you need to be able to speak publicly and articulately and be an advocate for that organization.
Thank you. Is there another question from the audience? Not hearing one, we'll make sure the other gentleman on the panel will have a chance. Would you like to ring in before I pose another question?
I think to that former question, one of the things that's really important here is that when Bill says that he actually looks for people who are smarter than him to work for him, that doesn't necessarily mean somebody who is innately brilliant and has just superior intellect, IQ or whatever. It means someone who actually has the ability to do things that he's not capable of doing, or that
I beg your pardon.
I'm sorry, there isn't anything in that category. But again, right back to you folks. You are the elixir. You are the people who make that kind of thing happen. If you are, in fact, getting these people to the point that they walk away from the community college and into a business environment and have specific skill sets, which is what everybody's looking for, these pathways issues and all of that, that is just absolute. That's the cream rising to the top.
We have another question over here.
Hi. Candor was mentioned earlier, and that's emphasized by Jack Welch. He is a big proponent of candor. He also focused on diversification in terms of evaluating employees. And when it comes to grading students, what insights can you give us? I've been thinking about diversification in grading grading students. And so I just would like to hear your insights in terms of transferring that type of philosophy from the workplace to the classroom.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand diversification in grading. I apologize.
He used a 20-70-10, so the top
Right.
20,
Right.
is they receive bonuses. The 70 he works with, and the 10% they fail. At the community college level, we see just different ways of grading. Some faculty will just give everyone an A. You know, some others, you know, we have different approaches to grading. So I'm just thinking about what can we learn from corporate America in terms of grading the class.
Do you think you're doing them a favor if you give them all an A?
No, we're not.
Yeah.
We're not
And-
at all.
This is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine in leaders being afraid to be brutally honest with employees.
That's right.
The analogy I use is if I'm failing my math test, I want to know it so I know what to study to improve. The same thing with, we do annual, we call them performance, PDP, I can't remember what it stands for. The first P is performance, I remember that. But it's annual evaluations, and it's an open dialogue. And so I see a lot of them that managers or leaders who work for me evaluate employees, and I look at them, I'm like, you're afraid to be honest with them. So all I would say is be as honest as you can, and it's okay. One thing about my kids is I wanted them to see what failure felt like early in life, and if one of my children was taking your class, I'd rather them fail in a math class in community college than breeze through, get all A's, and then get out in the workplace and they fail there. That's a bad first time to fail in life. So my advice would be figure out how to throw a little failure in there. And I'm not saying, not grade it properly, but it's okay early in life to be challenged enough, one, and then two, out of that challenge to not be the best in the class. I actually feel bad for people who get too far along in life who haven't felt what failure feels like. It's okay to fail as long as you learn something from it.
Exactly.
Bill, you got a quick comment to add?
The one thing I would caution against, though, is there was this wonderful company named Enron that had a system called rank and yank, and it was brutal. I mean, it did not give the employees a chance who were rated low to grow, and they just arbitrarily cut them out of the loop. So you need to work with those who are that lower 10% or 15% or whatever number you set as a bottom line, so to speak, and make sure that talk to them one-on-one, sit down, be thoughtful, and just say, but be brutally honest. I've heard that phrase used a couple of times by our panel too. But kind and constructive. Constructive. I mean, anybody can, just be mean and say, oh, you're worthless. I think one of the things that's funny is that I would have people coming to Dominion Resources to interview me for jobs who were graduates of Harvard or some other Ivy League school and applying for X position. And then I would have others who would come in and they had been and they had just graduated. These are the first ones I mentioned. Then I would have others who would come in who had been in the field for 20 years, a lot of experience, some with just a community college degree. Well, I'm not trying to sound like I'm prejudiced against the Ivy Leagues. I do think they can be snotty. But no, but seriously, I think we're in a situation where I want to hire somebody who can hit the ground running and knows what's going on. Now, that's a challenge for you as you students, is to realize you may not be able to enter the job market where you want to ultimately be. You're going to have to realize that you've got to work your way up. But be patient. That doesn't mean don't work hard or make sure people know what you're doing, but just be there and understand that you will eventually get there if you apply yourself and if you do a good job. And if the company doesn't recognize it, move on.
Friends, please join me in thanking this wonderful panel. I wish we had more time to spend with them. We're going to conclude our session now, and they might hang around for a moment or two to take any additional questions you have. Thanks for joining in this afternoon.
Good job.
We have a great aversion